And the former doctor for the US Olympics gymnastics team, Larry Nassar, was recently sentenced for 175 years for hundreds of cases of sexual abuse. Some asked, why not just give him the death penalty? Well, leaving aside the particulars of the case, not too many people do get the death penalty these days. There's only about a quarter of the executions there were in the late 90s. The death penalty is a lot less popular too. With 55% approval, it has the least amount of support since the early 1970s, possibly because racial minorities hate it. Only 36% of Hispanics support the death penalty and 29% of blacks support it. But why is that? Well, firstly, it's drawn out and it's expensive. This is how long the process has taken from sentencing to execution over the years. You can see it taking longer and longer. The average waiting time for those executed in 2017 was 19.5 years. And studies have found death penalty cases cost at least 70% more than a non-death penalty case in Kansas, all the way up to 3 times more in Maryland. And those numbers include the cost of life in prison. Secondly, executions get botched. Between 1890 and 2010, 3% of all executions were botched, including 2% of electrocutions, 5% of gas chamber executions, and a whopping 7% of lethal injections, leading to prisoners screaming and convulsing during torturous executions, which Supreme Court Justice Eleanor Kagan described as the chemical equivalent of being burned alive. Maybe that's why some states now use paralytics in their lethal injections. That way, if you regain consciousness during the execution, you won't bother anybody and you can slowly suffocate while potassium chloride burns through your veins, even though the American College of Veterinarians forbids the use of paralytics when euthanizing animals. Next, wrongful convictions. Believe it or not, even in 2017, there were 5 people previously convicted of murder and sentenced to death who were later exonerated. Furthermore, black people are 7 times more likely to be found wrongfully convicted than white people, and they stay in jail for an average of 4 extra years than white people do before they're exonerated. So the system isn't exactly race neutral. Next, the death penalty beats up on the unfortunate. Out of the 23 people executed in 2017, 6 of them had significant evidence of mental illness, 10 had significant evidence of brain damage, 18 had evidence of serious childhood trauma or abuse, and 5 had glaringly deficient legal representation or review. Overall, 20 of the 23 executed inmates had theoretical red flags. So why were they executed? Often, it's because you're in the wrong state. 45% of the 1,500 executions since 1976 occurred in 2 states, Texas and Oklahoma. Mind you, for some, the alternative could seem even worse, because death row sucks. 61% of the death row inmates in America are locked in permanent solitary confinement. In fact, 80% of Pennsylvania's death row inmates have been in solitary confinement for 10 years. One of them is suing Pennsylvania because they've been in solitary for 27 years. And the UN Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners prohibit solitary confinement for more than 15 days. So you can understand why Americans might be turning away from the death penalty. It's not always the best, although prisoners would probably prefer it to this.
Well, I'm gonna have to get